Hello, this is Sarah Kite with UT Extension McMinn County, and Mondays in May, I'll be doing some canning tips. So today I thought I'd talk to you about jams and jellies and some of the common problems that might occur when you're making jams and jellies, and you've always thought, why is that happening to me? So let's get started. Jams and jellies. Right now is May. May is a great time for strawberries to be in season. Right now, they're delicious, they're super sweet, and if you want to get a good jam, strawberry jam, you need some good strawberries. So whenever you're putting food back into a jar or you're going to freeze it, make sure you always pick the best product you can find. So find some good ripe strawberries. Discard any that have bruising or don't look good. Find a good fruit. So here's a question I received. If my recipe doesn't call for processing, do I need to do so? Always process. If you're going to take your jar and work hard at, making jam or whatever you're going to fill your jar with, and then put it on your shelf, you have to process it. The processing drives all the air out. It seals the jar. That way, while it's sitting on your shelf, you're not having bacteria and other things growing in your jar. So if I took my leftover lasagna and I put it in my Tupperware container and put it on the shelf next to my cereal in the pantry, would you see anything growing in there after a while? Yes. Same thing with your canned foods. You have to process it in a water bath canner or a pressure canner. And that leads to another question. How do I know which one to use? Well, the great thing about recipes that have been tested, it'll tell you what to do. Sometimes we have recipes you find on the internet or they're just passed down through people. You have to make sure you find a tested recipe. And you can go to our UT Extension website. Another great resource is the National Center for Home Food Preservation. And I've got the website on the screen there for you. All the recipes are tested. If you don't find a recipe on there that you want to use, that means there hasn't been a recipe they found when they tested it, it didn't have things growing in it that can cause you sickness. So go to that website, find a good tested recipe. Also Ball Blue Books, those are all great tested recipes. So how do you know if you should water bath or pressure can? If it's a high acid food, you need to water bath it. If it's a low acid food, you have to pressure can it. So all of our jams and jellies and preserves, those are high acid, so you would use the water bath canner. And next week, I'll go through some step-by-step instructions on how to actually use a water bath canner when making jams and jellies. So stay tuned if that would help you. Another question, what happens if my jam and jelly doesn't gel? Have you ever got to your jar and you shook it and it was really syrupy? So you might want to remake it if you choose to, and there's instructions that you can find. You have to remake it, pour it out of the jar and go through your steps again, or you can use it as a nice syrup on a pancake or a biscuit or even ice cream. Still use it that kind of capacity. So what if your jam or jelly is too stiff? You've gone through all that work and it's just stiff. Sometimes you've overcooked it. You have to boil it rapidly. Sometimes you do a long, slow boil, and that's overcooking it, which causes your jam or jelly to be stiff. Also, you might add too much pectin. Sometimes you might be counting your pectin scoops, and then your phone rings, and you come back to your jam, and you wonder how many scoops, and you might add another one just to be safe. Well, adding too much pectin causes it to be stiff. Using too little fruit, always measure your fruit, too little sugar, too much underripe fruit. In the case of your fruit, you got to find a good fruit that's not too overripe, not too underripe, so it's just perfect to get you that perfect jam. So always follow the manufacturer's instruction. If you're using a box of liquid pectin, follow the instructions. If your recipe calls for a powdered pectin, all you have is liquid, I'm sorry, it's not going to work. You have to use what the recipe calls for. So liquid pectin for a recipe with liquid, powder for powder. And some recipes are no pectin because the fruit has enough natural pectin to allow it to gel just fine. So that leads to the question, should I slow boil it or should I rapidly boil it? You might know the answer because I just gave it away. You need to boil it rapidly. If you boil it slow and long, it actually destroys the pectin in the fruit juice, causing it to be too syrupy, too runny. So Headspace is another thing that people talk about, and your Headspace is really important. In the top picture there, the Headspace is the room from the lid to the liquid that's in the jar. So for jams and jellies, most call for a 1/4-inch headspace. So get a ruler out and actually measure. There's canning kits that provide tools in there, and there's a little jar measure that you can use. So from the top of the lid to the product, it should be a 1/4-inch headspace. And then people wonder why. Why do I have to measure my headspace? Well, it's very important. If there's too little headspace, it's allowed the food may expand, and out comes the air, forcing it under your lid during processing. And if it's your jam or jelly, you don't want the sticky jam to get under your lid because then you won't have a good seal, and now air can seep in. If too much headspace is allowed, the food in the top is likely to discolor or sometimes get a proper seal because you haven't processed it long enough for all the air to be driven out. And most jams and jellies process for only 5 minutes. So you want to make sure that you get the perfect headspace, which is 1/4-inch, so you can have the perfect product at the end. You do all that work, you want to make sure at the end you have the right headspace before you put in the water bath for processing. So just some quick tips today. On the screen here, you have my email, you have our Facebook page. If you're out there making jams and jellies or canning any type of food, preserving it, you can also freeze and dry for preserving. And you have stumbled upon some problems, you can email me, you can call our office, and you can also go to the Facebook page and you can type in your comments, your questions. I'm sure a lot of people have similar questions that you might have. So post them and I'll be happy to help you in any way that I can. So I hope that you have a great Monday, and I'll see you next Monday for some more canning tips. Have a great day.